Hi, I'm Nicole Chase and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing something new for me. I'm going to do a sort of crochet with me video where I'm going to be finishing some projects and just chatting along the way. Right now I'm working on Batter the Baseball Bear, which is a new pattern. Here is a finished one in worsted weight yarn. And the body of the bear is a baseball, very similar to my Fumble the Football Bear pattern. And by the time this video is out, the pattern should be out as well, or very close to it. If you're new here and don't yet know how to crochet, I actually have a free beginner course on my blog called Amigurumi for Beginners, and I'll link that below. So I've just finished the body, which is going to be the baseball, and I'm going to join my next color. I'm using Parfait Chunky from Premier Yarns, and I actually do what I call a seamless color change, and it's basically so that you can't see that normal little step in between color changes that you often see when working in the round. And I do have a full tutorial on that on my blog and on YouTube as well. But essentially you join your color in the back loop of your next stitch and pull that up. Then I tie a knot. I know that some people are totally against knots in crochet. I am not one of them. So you tie your knot and then you start crocheting in the very next stitch. Work your way around, and then once you get to that last stitch that you worked in the back loop, you then work kind of in the front loop and underneath where you made that color change. And that might not make a ton of sense here with me just explaining that, but it is, again, all available on my blog, and then I also have a video here on YouTube as well, which I'll link below. So right now this pattern is being worked on by my testers, and I am so excited to see their projects. We have a couple who are making the baseball be a softball, so it'll be yellow rather than white, so I think that's super cool. And then we have a variety of like worsted weight yarns and different plush yarns, so I'm pretty excited to see what they all look like when they're finished. I absolutely love using Parfait Chunky yarn, but I do hate frogging it. So anytime I'm doing any sort of like increasing or decreasing, I always pay very close attention so that I don't mess up my count and then have to pull out any stitches. So now I've just finished my increasing rounds, and now I'm just moving on to straight single crochet for the head here. And this is what we're at so far. So I asked on my Instagram stories what kind of things you guys might want me to talk about during these types of videos. And one of the questions that I received was about my design process and how I go about designing patterns. And I don't really have like a clear-cut answer for that. It really depends on what I'm making. But what I can say is that I do try to keep a lot of my designs to be of a similar size and shape, particularly ones that are like in a series, like my dinosaur patterns. They all kind of look like they belong together. And same with my farm animal patterns. They all also look like they belong together, like they're a set. And that's kind of what I'm going for most of the time. So if I'm designing something that I want to fit in with others, I will start by taking a look at what those other ones look like, what their shaping is, and then I usually try to sketch out my idea on a body or shaping that is similar to those other ones in the collection. If I'm designing something totally brand new, there's no rhyme or reason for how I do things. I usually start with a sketch and just trial and error, really. After you have been crocheting for a while, you start to figure out what increases due to shaping and what decreases due to shaping, and how you can combine them to create different shapes, and how you want to attach things. And so I feel like I kind of have a backlog of that information just floating around in my mind, and when I start drawing up an idea, it just kind of comes to me. I know that's not the best answer and certainly not very technical, but that's how it is for me for amigurumi. Now, when I used to spend a lot more time designing things like hats and wearables, it was certainly more technical whenever you're trying to meet certain sizes, but that's not generally a concern for me anymore since my focus is amigurumi. I find that designing amigurumi for me is way easier and I enjoy it more, so that's what I stick with. But for this pattern in particular, I already have a football bear, and I kind of wanted this baseball bear to look similar, like they belong together. So I basically kept the arms and legs the same, the head is pretty much the same, ears are the same, and I've just changed the body. So obviously that changes the placement of things, and the legs are crocheted in rather than being sewn on. So there was adjustments there, but the patterns themselves are going to be pretty similar so that the finished product looks like they kind of belong together. And then when I get through the other sports that I want to do, you can make an entire set of all of these sports bears and they'll look like they belong together. So that's what I'm doing here. I am almost to the point where I'll be adding the safety eyes, which is one of my very favorite parts of amigurumi. I just really think that the eyes add that finishing touch and make it start to look real. So I'm almost there. I decided to go with baseball next, mostly just because of where we are in terms of like sports season starting. Both of my kids play basketball, but by the time I had time and was ready to do a new sports bear, basketball is pretty much over right now. So I'm definitely planning on doing one of those in the near future, hopefully at the start of basketball season, probably in the fall this year. So expect to see that. My son plays t-ball. This is his second year, and my husband is coaching his team, so that should be fun. So this bear that I'm making right now is actually for my son. He saw the smaller one that I made, which is the one that I made for the pattern and that I used for tutorial photos and all of that. And he was like, "Oh, is that for me?" And I try to keep my pattern stuffies pretty much just in a case so that they stay nice, because it turns out that like every single time I sell or give away a stuffed animal that's for a pattern, I end up needing to showcase it in a video or take new photos with it. So I've started keeping at least one sample of every pattern. So I'm not going to give him the one that I have done yet, but this one will be for him, and it's nice and soft. I got my safety eyes. I'm going to try 12mm for this bear. For the smaller one, I used 9mm, which is probably one of my most used sizes. 9 and 12 are generally my go-to. 9 more so for the worsted weight yarn, and 12 for Parfait Chunky, which is my favorite plush yarn. And whenever I'm placing the eyes, what I like to do is take my hook out so that it's not messing up the shaping at all. And then I like to just kind of play with the placement to make sure that I have it just right. So in my initial design, I put them between rows 23 and 24. So let's count that. 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, and then I leave 5 stitches between. So I always start with what I have written in the pattern. If I'm designing something new, I just put them where I like them and then write it later, right where I decided I like them. But of course, with every single project that you do, the placement might just look a little better somewhere else. So I'm never married to being in the exact same spot for every single project, because different yarns, different sizes, it just might look better somewhere else. So I do like this though. This is the original placement in the pattern, so I think that's going to work out just fine. Something that I also like to do before putting on the backings to the safety eyes is if there's anything that needs placed on the face, like this little snout needs put on just below the eyes, I'm going to just double check that that all works with the placement that I have, and this does. So I think it's safe to put those safety eye backings on. And I generally like to use just plain black safety eyes. If I want to add something more detailed, I will generally just embroider around the safety eyes. I've tried a couple of the colored eyes that have like the glitter, and they're super pretty, but those backs are just so hard to get on, and I find that when I have to use them, I kind of put off putting in the eyes, which then kind of halts my project and slows me down, and I don't want to do that. So I pretty much just stick to these black ones. The eyes, the backings are pretty easy to get on. So here we are so far, and I am going to crochet another round and then add my stuffing. Okay, so now I'm at the point where I'm ready to add my stuffing, and I'm just going to take out my hook, and I use polyfill stuffing. And what I do is I actually get the big giant box of it, and then I just reload my bag here to keep here in my office. Otherwise I wouldn't have much room to be recording this video right now. Those boxes are huge, and the one I have has lasted me for a really long time, probably 2 years or so. So if you make a lot of plushies and you go through a lot of stuffing, I would highly recommend the box of stuffing. It's a great deal and it lasts a really long time. Okay, so as I am stuffing the head, I'm checking the shaping to make sure that we don't get any lumps and bumps. Something that I think is really important whenever you're stuffing is to pull the stuffing apart, and that helps to prevent any sort of weird bumps on the outside. So here we are so far, looking pretty good. I think we are almost there, just a little bit more. I really don't feel like there's any perfect science to stuffing, just personal preference really. Some people like their items stuffed more firmly than others. What I think the most important thing though is that you're just not stuffing so much that you start to see holes in your stitches. I think we are good to go with that. Okay, so a couple more rows and then time to close off the head. So all of my crochet pieces are done. So for this pattern, the legs are made before the body here, and then as you're crocheting the body, the legs are crocheted in as you work, and then the head is worked as one piece as well. So I've already made the snout, ears, and arms, and I will be attaching those. What I'm going to do first is do the snout and the ears, and then I'm going to do the embroidery for the baseball before I attach the arms. Anytime I'm doing any sort of assembly, I like to use pins or sewing sticks, something to hold my pieces in place. Since right now I'm just going to be putting on smaller pieces, I'm going to use pins. And the kind that I like are T-pins, and they're just shaped like a T, and they're long enough that they hold the piece in for me, and they have the T on the top, which kind of holds the piece better than the normal sewing pins with the little round piece on top. So I really like these. And they're also really good for blocking. If you do any sort of garments or anything that needs blocked, these work for that as well. So I'm going to start with the snout, and first just figure out where I want to put it. And anytime that I am attaching pieces, I always try to hide the end where the string is that you're going to be using for sewing, and subsequently where you're going to be fastening off that string and hiding it inside. I always try to put it towards the bottom or somewhere that it's not quite so visible. So that placement looks pretty good, and I'm just going to pin it all in place. Here's what I have so far, and now I'm just going to sew around. What I'm going to do is just sew until about here, leaving about an inch or so spot open so that I can add some stuffing before I finish sewing the rest of the way around. I'm going to give you guys a closer look at what I'm doing. I'm going to flip the camera around and get you close up so you can watch me do the assembly process. Okay, so here I am going to attach the snout. And especially when you're working with a yarn like Parfait Chunky or any sort of chenille yarn, I think it's really important that you pull your yarn tightly with every single stitch, because if you leave it loose and try to pull it later, it's likely to get caught up and shed or rip. Okay, now I have a little spot left here, and that's where I'm going to put my stuffing in before sewing up the rest of the snout. Okay, and we should only need a little bit, but again, tearing it apart so that it is good and fluffy, no clumps or lumps in there. Okay, and that looks good to me, so I'm going to sew the rest. Okay, now I'm going to get my knot in there to secure my yarn, and then hide my ends inside. And there's some shedding, of course. Definitely to be expected with this kind of yarn, but worth the end result in my opinion. Okay, now I have the ears, and I'm ready to attach them to the top of the head, and I'm going to use pins to hold them in place. And I definitely use my work in progress amigurumis as pin cushions. No reason they shouldn't be helping out with the process, right? Okay, that placement looks pretty good to me, so I'm going to start sewing. Here you can see there's some shedding here just from attaching these pieces. I know some people like to use regular worsted weight yarn for sewing on pieces, and I like that for things that require a lot of sewing, but for smaller things like this, I can struggle through these shedding pieces. Something that I like to do whenever I'm attaching any two pieces like ears or arms, something that's going to have two different ends, is after I do one, rather than tying off and weaving my end through, I just push it through to kind of the middle of the two pieces. So for the ears here, I'm just going to push it through here. And then after I sew this ear, I'm going to also take that end through here, and then I'm going to tie those in a knot and weave them together. And I find that that makes it more secure and less likely to come undone whenever they're being tied to another strand of yarn rather than tied to itself. Okay, so here's what I mean with the ears. I have that end and I'm just going to push it through to meet the other one. And now I'm going to tie those together. And then I'm going to hide my ends inside my piece. I don't know if there's a name for that or if that's something that other people do, but it's something that I like to do. It kind of saves the step of having to tie off one at a time, and I am all about saving time when you can. So we've attached the snout and the ears, and now we're going to move on to embroidery. I need to embroider a nose and also embroider the baseball stripes. Okay, now I am ready to embroider the nose, and I'm doing that with black worsted weight yarn. I don't really like to embroider with chenille yarns like this. So first I'm going to start with the little line that goes down the middle, and I'm going to insert my needle through the very center of the magic ring. And that looks good to me, so I'm going to go right back through, and this is about where the side of the nose will be. So what I'm going to do now is basically embroider around and around right here to kind of build up the nose. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. I think I might do one more here. And I'm going to take my needle through to meet the end. And same method as whenever I was tying off the ears. I'm going to tie the two strands together and hide them inside. Now I'm going to move on to doing the baseball stripes, which I am actually going to be doing in a separate YouTube video. I am going to do that and then I will come right back. Okay, I have just finished doing the embroidery on the baseball, and I recorded a video throughout the entire process, so you'll be able to access that if you're making this project as well. So now I'm going to add the arms, and I have those done already. And like usual, I'm going to use pins to attach them before I start sewing. Okay, so I have the arms pinned in where I like them, and I'm going to sew them on now. And he's finished. This is again Batter the Baseball Bear, and by the time this video comes out, the pattern should be live or close to it. So there he is. And this was the first video that I've done in this sort of style, like the crochet with me and just kind of chatting. So let me know in the comments, what did you think? Are there any other topics that you would like me to cover in future videos? And would you like to see more videos like this? Let me know. Thanks for watching.